Start. Shall I start? Radhika, kindly mute. Yeah. And Radhika is not muting herself.
Children, will you all please be quiet? Take out your subjects and do.
Radhika is in the classroom, I think so, in her own class. Anyhow. Yeah. See, I'm starting. See, the introduction, like in this particular unit, I will be talking about what is rural community or what are rural communities. As you all know, the rural communities form the backbone of India, and they are adhering to the edge that India lives in its villages. And as you all know, their village life is much talked about in terms of serenity, idyllic surrounding, free from conflict, and have a beautiful relationship with nature. But when you look at the geographical and cultural viability, it brings with it the vast terrain of India. And we have to remember that the most of the Indian society like best in rural areas. And rural society is better understood through various aspects like its size, population, physical structure, and the social and economic way of life. So here in this particular part, I will be talking about the size, the characteristics, what is the social structure, what is the economic structure of the rural areas. And here we are also talking about what are the various policies and how the policies and programs are impacting the rural areas. Okay. As you all know that, when you talk about rural area ante enti ante.
Okay.
Radhika, kindly mute. Shazda, please tell me. Shazda, please boliye. Rishikesh Raju, please tell me. Radhika is not muting herself. Okay. Shazda, you want to say something? Fine. Yeah, as you all know that when look at the rural society, one of the major characteristics of rural society is homogeneity. So there is homogeneity across villages in terms of their broad features of social and economic characteristics. And the technological and organizational aspects are also very simpler when it is compared to the urban areas. So within the villages, if you look into, they are bounded societies that, they clearly demarcate between various social groups. And when you look at the meaning of rural community, like rural community, nothing but which resides in rural areas. And rural areas, as per census, consider the village as a basic area of habitation. And village is usually considered as the smallest area of habitation. And the village generally follows the limits of a revenue village that is recognized by the local administration. So when you talk about the entire village revenue is 1 unit, and there may be unsurveyed villages which are coming under forest and other areas, where the locally recognized boundaries of each habitation's area are followed within the larger unit or the forest range officer's jurisdiction. So when you talk about rural is nothing but it refers to the livelihoods that are basically based on agriculture and something that is to do with the nature. So you have to remember this point. What is rural? Rural refers to livelihoods that are based on agriculture and they have to do something with it. They're dependent on the nature. Okay. And we look at also refers to the scale and nature of technology which are used in it is different than the urban areas. Okay. And the technologies that are used in rural areas is very simple. And the production level, if you look into, it is something which is meeting the needs or meeting the family needs, and the surplus that could be sold in the market. Okay, so that is all about the rural, urban. What do you understand by rural community? What exactly rural community is? So look at the rural community or rural urban dichotomy or rural urban continuum. So rural urban dichotomy, you have to note down this point. Rural urban dichotomy is experienced in states but not in others. For example, in some states like Kerala, there is a distinction of a village and town which is impossible to make a difference. Instead, there is a continuum. For example, changes are taking from rural to urban are called urbanization. And there is nothing like the ideal model of rural or urban, but an increasingly urban flavors that to the rural locates. The rapid process of urbanization through the establishment of industries, urban trades, and facilities has increased the difference between villages and cities. So there are many sociologists who treat rural urban as a dichotomous categories. Who's that? Who's that? Shazda?
Yes, ma'am.
Mute kar do. Okay, so when I talk about the dichotomous categories between the rural urban, they are differentiated at various levels, which may include occupational differences, which may include environmental differences, which may include the differences in the size of communities, differences in the density of population, differences in social mobility, directions of migration, stratification, etc., etc., etc. Okay, so rural and urban communities believe that, or a third view of the sociologists is that they believe that both village and city are elements of the same civilization. Hence, there is neither rural-urban dichotomy nor continuum is meaningful. And there are also some sociologists, they have used the concept of rural-urban continuum to stress the idea that there are no sharp breaking points to be found in the degree or quantity of the rural-urban differences. So we can just see, I will be talking about the rural-urban continuum and dichotomy later. But before that, let us look at what are the diversities of rural communities. What are the diversities found in the rural communities? See, rural society, as you know, includes a number of communities that live in what are known as villages. Rural society and villages, we have to remember this. And village in India vary. Villages are not the same in all the places. They vary with respect to their natural resources. They with respect to the population density, amenities, diversities, languages, cultural pieces, etc. So when we look at the villages have very old population, as a majority of younger population migrate in search of jobs or in search of education. So such villages are known as grey villages. Listen to this point. What are the grey villages? The villages which are left over with the old population and wherein the younger population migrate to other cities, other places in search of jobs or education. Such kind of villages are called as grey villages. And some of the villages are also uninhabited. And there are other villages which are known as fringe villages. What are the fringe villages? Type of villages I'm talking. Different types of villages. First, I said grey villages, where is left. Grey villages are villages which are left over with the old population. And there are fringe villages which are located in the outskirts of the towns. Until the outskirts of the towns that eventually become part of the urban whole. Some examples like, we talk about, we can talk about this outskirts in Telangana, like we talk about after LB Nagar or after Boduppal or something like that. Those are the outskirts of the villages. Like now the villages are merging into the urban areas. So that can be called as a fringe villages. Okay. So a village can have varying composition of social and occupational groups. Villages so chala occupations main occupation constitutes agriculture. Apart from that, we can also see the artisans, we can see the craftsmen and other occupational groups that are again dependent on each other. And one major understanding was that, of this particular rural community is that, they are not, which are also are non-tribal, they tend to live in rural areas. And the people, those who are living in these villages, are primarily food producing units. Okay, villages are primarily food producing units, and they are agriculture based. So the produce not only is used for their own subsistence, but also for the urban society, which are non-producing. You remember this point, major point over here. The villages are primarily food producing units. So they are agriculture based, and they, whatever the produce is been produced by them, they keep that for their own subsistence. And the remaining, they will be sending it to urban societies, where the urban societies are the non-producing units. So the land and the natural resources are the primary means of rural societies. What are the primary means of rural societies? Land and the natural resources. And when you look at the ecological condition also influences the pattern of their stay. Okay, with hamlets that are stringed together in individual houses. So the way the houses are built, how the kind of settlements they have, it is also very, very different. For example, we look at the housing pattern and settlements in rural areas. If we look into one kind, we find is different kinds of villages are found all over the country, as you all know. If you look at the villages of Telangana, if you look at the villages of Maharashtra, they are not the same. Okay, in some villages, the fields of the villages surrounded tight clusters of the illu. The houses are surrounded by the fields. Okay, and an outlying hamlet or several settled hamlets are also found attached to some village in this particular areas. And there are some settlements like linear settlements, which are especially found in Kerala and Konkan, which are, water belt areas, and the delta lands of Bengal. So they are having linear settlements. In such settlements, houses are strung out each, surrounded by its own compound. Okay? The houses have their own compounds. So there is little to physically demarcate where one village ends and another begins. It is not possible. And there is one kind of a scattering of homestead or clusters of 2 or 3 houses. In this case, what happens? Physical demarcation of village is not clear, and such settlements are found in hilly areas. The hilly areas of demarcation of the village is not clear, where the clusters of 2 or 3 houses are bound together. Okay, and they are found in Himalayas or Gujarat, in Satpura range of Maharashtra, etc., etc., etc. So usually when you look into, a village is conceived as a physical entity. What is a village? Village is being conceived as a physical entity having an aggregation of houses of mixed architecture. Like, some houses are made of wood and thatched and some of cement. Okay, in the midst of surrounding agriculture fields. The village can be more than 10,000 population. Okay, village can have more than 10,000 population, as in the case of a state like Kerala, or the village may be a conglomeration of cement houses inhabited by the people who are predominantly in service or maybe self-employed non-agriculture in the case of Himachal Pradesh or other hilly areas. Okay, so this is about the housing pattern and settlement in rural areas. Let me be very quick here. And we look at the sizes of the villages. What is the size of the village? The size of the village is been changing. It is not the same. According to 1981 census, if we look into, there were 5,57,137 inhabited villages in the country. By the year 1991, the number has increased further. It has further increased in 2001. We talk about there are many towns are coming up, including the villages. Okay, and there are 72% of the population, as you all know, live in the villages. And one more characteristics of village we can look at it as the rural life is characterized by direct relationship of people to nature. Okay, there is land, animal, and plant life. This is one of the important characteristics of rural life: land, animal, and plant life. And here, agriculture is the main occupation, wherein agriculture provides livelihood to about 58% of the labor force. So this is one thing you can remember about the characteristics of rural communities, that there is the dependencies on the land, animal and plant life. Agriculture is the main occupation, and agriculture provides livelihood about 58% of the labor force. This is all about the characteristics of rural areas, how the rural area is all about. Now, coming back to the rural social structure, what is the rural social structure? How the rural structure is how it is, what it consists of, and how it is framed. For example, look into village, community, family, and caste are the basic components of the rural social structure. You have to remember this thing. What are the basic components of the rural social structure? Village, community, family, and caste are the basic components of the rural social structure. And they encompass the entire field of life. There is social, economic, political, and cultural life of the rural people. Okay, so their rural social structure would refer to the interrelationships, interconnectedness, and interdependence of different parts of rural society. Remember this point. What is rural structure refers to? Rural social structure refers to the interrelationships, interconnectedness, and interdependence of the different parts of the rural society. Okay, so there is this connectedness is there, dependence is there, as well as, there is a kind of interrelationship is there. We can talk about the kinship aspect. And caste system is one of the unique social structure. Indian social structure is caste, and rural social structure is also caste. And caste system is one unique social structure, and the interrelationship of the different units constitutes the structure of the rural society. So society, caste, and panchayats have control over the individual. Who have the control over the individual in the rural areas? Society, so rural society, caste, and panchayats have control over the individuals. So let us now look into the basic, what does the rural social structure consist of? As I said you that caste is one of the basic characteristics. Caste is something talks about the unique social structure of rural area. The caste is a fundamental principle of Hindu social organization or in the Indian villages. And the structural basis of Hinduism is the caste system. Okay. And caste system, a caste is also seen as a monopolistic guild, or village is conceptualized as an aggregate of caste. Many castes are present and they are traditionally associated with an occupation. So the members of the caste have matrimonial relationship with the neighboring villages. What I mean to say is that they have to get married not in their own villages, but matrimonial relations are only possible in the neighboring villages. And the members of the caste are spread over a region more than one village. So sometimes, the caste also named after the corresponding occupations they are doing. Like, we have this chakali, we have this doli caste or washerman or kammari, or different castes present in the villages. And members of the caste marry within their own caste. Endogamy is practiced over here. The members of the caste marry within their own caste, but usually outside their villages, not in their villages, outside their villages. This you have to remember. So in the other word, we can say the village is exogamous, okay, but the caste is endogamous. So village exogamy is practiced. A person of the same village will not marry the person from the same village. He has to marry another village. A girl or a boy should be from the other village. And the caste means they have to marry within their own caste. If I am a chakali or a kammari, I have to marry in my own caste. So there are some system of marriage in which the men of upper caste marry women of lower caste, wherein, allowing lower caste women to move up the hierarchy. This is known as, hypergamy or anuloma. You have to remember this concept. So there are some system of marriage in which the upper caste men of upper caste marry women of lower caste, where, they are allowing the lower caste women to, in the stratification, the hierarchy, their strata is up, because women has to take the name of a husband after marriage. She takes the surname of a husband. So automatically, when a lower caste woman marries the upper caste man, automatically in the hierarchy, her position will rise. So this is known as hypergamy anuloma. So for political purposes, social control and matrimony, the members of the caste in a village are dependent upon their caste group located in other villages. So society, caste, and panchayat have control over the individuals. Okay, and caste occupations are also found in the villages. But all the caste occupations are not found in the villages because, if you look at the Pochampalli village, if you go to in Nalgonda district, you can say people are into the caste occupation still existing. But nowadays, caste occupations are withering away in the villages. And the village has some caste, but for services, it may depend on members belonging to the various other castes. So caste and class are linked to each other, with high caste usually being associated with the higher classes. So higher caste people are having higher classes in the
Madam,
villages.
which chapter it is?
Nana, this is second chapter, Nana. First, second chapter combined just chaptuna. Hello? I'm talking about first chapter lo rural communities and urban communities. On second chapter lo rural social structure, rural economic structure chaptuna. Second unit. Combined just chaptuna. Okay, na? Is it okay?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, ma'am. Okay.
So you I've been just talking just about the rural society. Next class, I'll try to talk about urban society.
Okay.
Are you able to follow?
Yes, madam.
Any difficulty, please interrupt. Okay.
Okay, ma'am. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you so much, ma'am.
I'm just randomly talking today to you. Whatever difficulty you face, you please contact me. Okay.
Number, madam. Phone number.
I'll tell you. 90300
90300
14766.
14766.
63.
Okay, ma'am.
Yeah.
Okay,
now just let me finish because time అయిపోతా ఉంటుంది. Time సరిపోట్లే నాకు. Okay. I just cannot అన్ని చెప్పాలని ఉంది కానీ అన్ని చెప్పలేకపోతుంది 1 hour లో. Yeah.
Okay.
Anyhow. మన ఇంకొకటి apart from caste, what exists in the village is rural areas is the inter-caste relation. Very importantly. Inter-caste relations at the village level constitutes the vertical ties. Okay. So the caste living in a village are bound together by economic ties. The caste living in a village are bound together by economic ties. So generally, if you look at the peasant caste are numerically preponderant in villages, and they perform the agriculture work, and in turn, what happens, they need the services of the carpenter or the blacksmith or the leather works, other worker caste. So the agriculturist peasant caste are automatically dependent upon the other castes. So it's unlikely that all castes are located within a village. Consequently, they depend on neighboring villages for certain services, skills, and goods. Okay, so inter-caste relations are mediated by a system known as Jajmani system, which was existing earlier, but now we don't have this system. So where is Jajmani is a sort of mutual give and take form of relationship, in which one family is heritedly entitled to supply goods and render services to the other in exchange of the same. The services were exchanged in Jajmani system. So the person who is rendering the services or supplying the good is known as the Kamin or the Prajan, and the person to whom the services are rendered is called the Jajman. So now under Jajmani system, a permanent informal bond is made between a Jajman and a Kamin to meet each other's needs for goods and services. Later, the Jajmani system is broken, is categorized by unbroken hereditary. And again, a multi-dimensional relation based on barter system developed later. We must be knowing about this barter system existed later after the Jajmani system. Okay. So this is one kind of interrelationship between the castes exist in the villages. Apart from that, very important thing is the family and kinship relationship. This is very important in the rural areas. So when you go to rural areas, we are not called by our names or not recognized by our names. Simply there is a kind of relationship exist in the village, where we call by relations, like kins, like akka, bava, chelli, all this kind of relationship are exhibited in the villages. So rural family functions as a unit of economy. You should remember, when you look at the unit of economy, the rural families, because joint family, rural Indian society is known for a joint family system. So mostly it is based in the rural areas. So rural family functions as a unit of economic, cultural, religious, and political activity. You have to remember. And in agricultural societies, the family becomes the unit of production, distribution, and consumption. In rural areas, the family becomes a unit of production, distribution, consumption. And marriage is a decision of the family governed by rules of kinship. The kinship also exists, kinship through blood relationship or the family relation, marriage relationship. So the family has a strict control and administrative power over the individual. The family is very important in rural areas. So both nuclear and joint family, with their modifications, are found in rural areas, and there are inter-regional variations and different types of families we can also find. For example, the family is changing in rural India, which changes in the social and economic situation. the family as a unit of production has changed more into unit of consumption nowadays, because disintegration of family is taking place. People are moving out of the villages. It is now not a unit of production. Now it is a unit of consumption. What is the consumption rate? And what is the rules of marriage? Rules of marriage existing. The rules of marriage is also differing. Okay, it is not the same. What are the rules of marriage? The rules of marriage, look in South India, is different than the rules of marriage in North India. So what are the rules? Variation of rules of marriages. That is also found in the rural areas. Okay. Next is the political and economic condition. I'm talking of the rural social structure. All this will come into that. So next is the political and economic connections. So when you look into the political and economic conditions, political power entered in cities, centered in cities, controls villages, as you all know. And the conflicts between different people pertain mainly to the matters of land disputes, traditional power arrangements, or sharing of common resources, such as common pastures, water, or forest resources. All these are a kind of a chaotic or conflict between the disputes that are existing in rural areas. So when we look into the political aspect of rural areas, panchayats are usually the forms of dispute resolutions. This is good bit for me. What are the forums of dispute resolutions? Panchayats. Okay, and there are two types. One of the village panchayat and other are the jati panchayat, the caste panchayat. Caste councils good antam. There are the two types of panchayat, the village panchayat and the other the jati panchayat. The village panchayat, if you look into, deals with the welfare of the families living in that village, who are undertaking collective task of the village, like performing rituals for the welfare of the entire village, organizing program for the collective welfare, such as building tanks, roads, godowns, granaries, etc. And the traditional caste council called, Panch or Five comprises of a small but always an odd number, deals with issues related to caste matters and inter-caste relations. Okay, so a particular caste is dominant, implying either a numerical predominance or control over economic resources. So lower castes are often reduced to a marginal status. Okay, the dominant castes have often resorted to violence to keep other castes submissive. So the power of the panchayat has been reduced by the presence of secular formal institutions of the dominant caste. And there is also conflict between the traditional caste panchayat and secular institutions of the gram panchayat. Now we have this gram panchayat aspect, the panchayat institution is also playing a very vital role nowadays. And class has an economic dimension. Okay, classes have been there. Where, upper caste are the people, those who hold the large scale land, or most of the lands are in the hands of the upper caste, and the lower caste are the landless. We should remember this because we look into villages, village structure law, upper caste, equal lands. Lower caste people, they don't hold, they're just agricultural laborers. So when we look at the power relations are closely related to the gender location one has. For example, in rural societies, women have less power in decision making. And the 33 reservation decision because if you look at the plight of rural areas, the plight of women is very pathetic. Like, rural women have less power in decision making, and their needs are concerned, do not seem to be well articulated. And they're only confined to the homes and household activities, and they were not allowed to participate in the aspects of the village things. But if you look at the self-help groups have made lots and lots of changes in the villages. It has brought a drastic change in the villages. And their institutional presence is also considerably less as compared to the men. Okay, so this is all about the political and economic conditions. You have to remember now, when I talk about rural social structure, you have to remember that first one is the caste system, second one is the inter-caste relation, third one is the family and kinship relations, and fourth one is the political and economic connections. These four things you have to connect it to the rural social. I'm not going into details of anything over here. Just randomly, I'm talking about that village, community, family, and caste are the basic components of the rural social structure. Village, community, family, and caste are the basic components of the rural social structure. Remember this point. And 4 points you have to, five subheadings are caste system, inter-caste relationship, family and kinship relations, as well as political and economic connections. You remember these points, okay? This could be the basic features of the power. One majority question may be asked, like, what are the basic features of power relations in rural areas? You can put these aspects, okay? Now, let us look at the, now you look at the, we have seen the rural social structure. Now let us look at the rural economic sector, how the rural economic sector is formed. And as you all know that the salient features of rural economy are related to the conditions of agriculture. Agriculture is predominant in rural areas. It's a predominant economic activity. And the rural sector consists of agriculture and non-agricultural activity as well, which are known as farm and non-farm economy. So in agriculture, we have agriculture sector as well as, non-agriculture sector. So let us talk about that. What do you mean by agriculture sector and the allied structures which are not agriculture sectors? See, as we talk about agriculture sector, the agriculture subsector consists of agriculture and allied economic activities such as crop husbandry, animal husbandry, dairy, farms, fisheries, poultry, and forestry. So the non-agriculture sector consists of economic relatives activities related to industry, business, or service. Okay, and this refers to cottage and village industries like khadi, handloom, handicraft, etc. So business refers to micro enterprises, trading of general goods, small shop, petty traders, etc. Okay, what is business? Here, business refers to micro enterprise, trading of general goods, small shop, petty traders, etc. Whereas, services refers to transport, communication, banking, and input supply, marketing of farm and non-farm produce. So the main stakeholders of rural sector include farmers, agricultural and non-agricultural laborers, artisans, traders, money lenders, and those engaged in providing services such as transport, communication, processing, banking, and education and extension. Okay, so agriculture, as you all know, is a mainstay of Indian economy because of its highest share in employment and livelihood creation, without withstanding its reduced contribution to the nation's GDP. Okay, the share of agriculture in the gross domestic product has registered steady decline. We can see the decline in the gross domestic product on the share of agriculture from 36.4% from 1982 to 18.5% in the recent years, we can see. But yet, there is a decline. We could see that this sector continues to support more than 500 million people, providing employment to 52% of the workforce. That is the strength of agriculture. That is the base of agriculture. And this means that, that share of the value of goods and produces services produced by agriculture sector has diminished much more than the decline in the number of people depending directly on the activities of this sector. So here it is also important source of raw materials, and there is a demand for many industrial products, like particularly fertilizers, pesticides, agriculture implements, and a variety of consumer goods. So growth of agriculture over a period of time remained lower than the growth of non-agriculture sectors. You remember this point, because there's a gap between the growth of agriculture and non-agriculture sector began to widen since 1981, or we can talk about in the other developments that are taking place in the society. Okay, so I'm not going to go deeply over here. Yeah. Next part we can add over here is the dry land agriculture. See, dry land agriculture is usually unaccounted for in the mainstream agriculture. So it is in India, it is estimated that nearly 410 million people depend on the dry lands for a living. So dry land agriculture is another economy in rural areas that closely enmeshes with the poverty geography of the country. So the dry land in this country or in India constitute more than 70% of the cultivable lands, and despite several odds stacked against them, produce about 42% of the economies or the country's food. So dry land, 42% of the country's food is produced, and it is reported that nearly 83% of sorghum or 81% of pulses and 90% of oilseeds grown in the country come from this dry land agriculture, from these areas. So rural livelihood system is dry lands, which are, mix of natural resources based on non-agriculture resource based and migrant incomes. This have tended to persist over several decades without any change because of the policy focus on green revolution. I was talking about the green revolution earlier, but because of the policies of green revolution, the nature of the agriculture strategy underwent significant changes. Okay, because of this green revolution, other practices, other policies. Okay, and they have a wider and important implications for promoting rural livelihood base. And the strategy of green revolution and the spread of irrigation was also emphasized in these areas. Okay, it's very important. And much of the technologies, subsidies, and public support system provided under the undifferentiated agriculture policy, in fact, failed in fulfilling the needs or solving the problems of dry agriculture, land agriculture areas. But in fact, they also promoted inequity, whether we examine input support like irrigation fertilizers or output support like minimum support price and procurement price mechanism. A similar tendency is visible in terms of agriculture research priorities, technology development investment. Okay, so this is about the dry land agriculture. Next is allied agriculture activities. First, I spoke about agriculture sector. Then again, I spoke about dry land agriculture. Now, what is allied agriculture activities? See, allied agriculture activities are nothing but the animal husbandry or horticulture or pisciculture or apiculture or sericulture. Or this comes under the allied activities, which are again closely related to agriculture and provide marginal or substantial source of income for rural communities. Now, what are the non-agricultural activities? We spoke about the agricultural activities. What are the non-agricultural activities? What exactly are the non-agricultural activities? See, this area of the non-agricultural activities will constitute an important component of rural workforce, constituting 20 to 25% of rural workforce. This includes manufacturing of implements, work of artisans and craftspersons that supports the agriculture work. So rural industries that fall into the khadi and village industries serve as an important support for employment in rural areas. And some of the people are employed in rural services such as health, education, and the markets. Okay, and the workers in rural industries accounted for 3.8% of the rural workforce and about 3% of the rural workforce of the country. So it's very minimum and very less. And when you look at the basic features of the rural economy, I think we can write about 8 to 10 features of rural economy. One of the major feature of rural economy, excessive dependence on nature. This is one aspect you can remember. There is excessive dependence on nature. Okay. Secondly, depending on the nature itself, the quantum of production, whatever you can say, and distribution, we have to depend upon rainfall over the for any production. Rain is very important for the Indian farmers. Indian agriculture is vulnerable to natural calamities such as droughts, floods, hailstorms, cyclones. And this means that the degree of nature-induced risk and uncertainty in agriculture is higher than in the non-agriculture sector. Okay, so when we talk about the excessive dependence on nature is it is found in the rural area. Second aspect we can talk about is the low capital labor ratio. This particular low capital labor ratio refers to the amount of capital which is required for the rural workers or the per worker in the rural areas, and there is a large workforce depending on agriculture. This makes the capital available per capital low. Okay. Third major features of rural economy is the small economic holdings and livestock holdings. Like the existence land inheritance law means that the process of subdivision and fragmentation of land holding. It is becoming smaller. Land holdings are becoming smaller and smaller day by day because distribution is being divided among the family members. So the land holding is becoming very, very low over a period of time. And thus over 90% of farms in India are not financially viable. Okay, this you have to remember. 90% of farms in India are not financially viable. Okay, and low factor productivity. There is a low average crop yield per hectare compared to other nations. Like, the inadequate capital in the form of production of inputs or raw materials and improved machinery or equipment available per worker is very, very low. Next is long gestation and low rate of turnover. Like chala gestation period of investment in agriculture is long compared to non-agriculture enterprises. It is very long period, and there are 3 to 4 months period for crops to mature, 6 years for a calf to the stage where milk production is possible. And in horticulture, the food takes about 5 to 10 years for bearing fruit. So longer time is taken for a return on investment. This is one of the pathetic aspects that is existing in the people because they're depending on the nature, and this is one of the aspects. Next aspect we could talk about is the high incidence of poverty and unemployment. It's also found in rural areas. There's a reason migration is taking place. The poverty in terms of absolute number as per official figure is 22%. But the incidence of poverty and the conditions of the above poverty line turns into poverty situations are very much, there are plenty in number in rural areas. And there is increasing rural debt experienced even by the rich farmers, especially those in the cotton belt, people, those who are growing cotton. And because of natural disasters or anything like that, they lose the crop and they become indebted, they're indebted to the banks, etc., etc., etc. The uncertainties unleashed by the economic reform makes the poor suffer more. Okay, low skills are compounded by low work availability. And another aspect I could say is the more of illiterate and unskilled workforce. So unfortunately, more of unskilled people are found in rural areas because of the disadvantages, class and caste status. So they are unable to complete the basic schooling. Both individual and collective structural factors make it difficult for the labor force to somebody is disturbing. Yeah. Okay, so that is one of the aspects because there are unskilled forces are found, unskilled workforce is found in the rural area. And that is what is making difficult for labor force to acquire skill required to move them from primary sector to secondary or tertiary sectors. And lack of basic infrastructure is also one of the basic aspects because basic infrastructure in terms of connectivity and health and education facilities and also market facilities related to cold storage are still to be achieved in adequate numbers and quality in rural areas. It's not because if you talk about Telangana, it's not found in every district. It's only found in few districts like Nizamabad or Karimnagar, but not in other districts of Telangana. Okay. Another aspect is the rural assets and poverty. The picture of assets in rural areas is very skewed. 78% of the cultivators belonging to the category of marginal and small operators. So 78% people are marginal farmers in the rural areas. And in contrast, 2% of cultivators having holdings of more than 10 hectares. Each cultivate 29% of the land. So the average size of holding is bigger in states such as Punjab, Haryana, and Gujarat. And on the other hand, in eastern states like Bihar and West Bengal, the operational size of this holding is relatively small. So it may be remember that in the regional difference in the structure of holdings are related to the pressure of population of the land, soil, agroclimatic condition, and the extent of irrigation. So here is also true that, the economic value and productive potential of small holdings in irrigated areas might be higher than the relatively large holdings in areas where agriculture is largely dependent on rains. Okay. So the incidence of poverty is closely linked to the employment, ecological setting, and the ethnic profile of the population. Remember this. What is that link? Poverty is linked to employment, ecological setting, and ethnic profile of the population. See, even if employment is available, the nature of such an employment determines whether such a person is poor or not. Okay. And the incidence of poverty in rural is linked to such factors as landless or marginal farmers cultivating low value products, mostly for family subsistence, self-employed artisans, services, rendering people who are catering to low income customers and markets, or women-headed households, and groups with larger families but limited assets and earning opportunities. So this is one of the aspects that is existing in the rural areas. And rural credit market, one of the important aspects is the rural credit markets. Rural credit market talks about, see, as you all know, credit is required in rural areas for consumption and production purpose, because many of you girls come from rural areas. That without credit, consumption production becomes very difficult. So credit is very important. So consumption needs requires small amounts of credit that meets needs such as food, clothing, shelter, education, and health. The credit requirements are usually met from the sahukars or the money lenders or the informal institutions that are existing in the rural areas. However, there is increasing evidence that nowadays, as I said, the self-help group movement in several parts of the country, especially Telangana, Andhra, especially in the south, we can say, is able to make inroads into traditional money lending institutions because people are getting loans. People are getting loans from the banks. This share is less but growing. Okay, it is extending. People are not depending upon the sahukars or the money lenders who charge them huge interest on the money on the money provided to them. But now because of this banks and the self-help groups involvement, I think women are getting it for less vaddi rates. Okay, so traditional institution service because of their timely ready availability of credit and the informal linkages that would be caste or kinship or village based with the client group. There have been an effort to meet credit needs from the formal institutions, but there has been a low presence of these with addition to bureaucratic hurdles because there are certain constraints will be always there, and they are also facing some problems related to the aspect from the formal institution as well. Okay, so the growth of formal banking institutions is growing. The banks are providing loans to the rural areas, and the flow of credit to rural areas, it is, though I feel it has been declined. But people are not going to the south. They're depending upon the banks and other areas, sector, other services, to fulfill their needs like food, clothing, and shelter, or education or health. Okay, so this is all about the rural economic structure. The rural economic structure that is existing in every rural areas. The conditions are the same. Okay, this is all about the rural economic structure. Besides that, I would also talk about policies and practices. If we talk about what are the policies, I'm not going to talk about what are the policies that are existing in the rural areas. You must be aware of that. Different policies are being meant for the development of rural areas, right from Manrega program and many other things. But policies and prescriptions related to institutional presence and procedures play a very important role in rural areas, rural communities, we can see. And we talk about reform measures such as reduction in fiscal deficit, reduction of subsidies, devaluation of rupee, export orientation, reduction in agricultural credit. It has adversely affected the rural poor, especially in terms of food security, which relates to production, distribution, and pricing of the food grain. And as you all know that the agriculture sector is worst affected by the fiscal contraction, which invariably results in disproportionate cut in capital expenditure. As you all know that agriculture sector is the mainstay of rural Indian economy, which is closely related to the existing pattern of social equity. Okay. Reform and post-reform period impact on agriculture are found to be deleterious to the rural poor and the rural and people who are landless. Reforms have increased the vulnerability of these masses, and this form one of the critical issues for rural community development. And there are many policies that the government makes with regard to rural sector directly, such as policies related to agriculture, rural credit policy or investment to be made in social sectors, policy related to provision of infrastructure in rural areas such as health, education, employment. We talk about Manrega program, which is successfully implemented in rural areas, rural connectivity policies, housing and sanitation policies, drinking water policies. See, at the same time, these policies related to industries are also being implemented, such as mining, availability of land for the real estate, for urban areas. In fact, the urban areas are affecting the villages with located urban fringes, the urban areas expanding. Similarly, the fiscal policy which promotes export promotion, favoring areas for tourism, developments such as coastal areas, affects the rural people who are living in these areas. We talk about the mining and all, people are being displaced from the places. And in the name of development, people are being suffered. Okay. So this play a role in affecting the livelihood of the communities and making them vulnerable to the point of crisis and survival. Thus, these become critical for social workers or the policymakers to work with the rural communities. So anything that affects the rural populace, be it with governance issues such as service delivery or with lack of institutional presence, is of great concern for rural community work. Okay. So with this, I can say I just spoke about what are the rural communities. We just spoke about rural social structure and the rural economic structure. If you want me to talk about the rural policies, I have the policies also in my hand. If you can ask me, if you want me to tell about that. But I think it's a 1 hour class. I just don't have any time to extend with the class. But, and here in this particular unit, we have seen how rural communities are understood through certain key aspects like size, population. So here we discuss about what is the size of the population, physical structure, and their social and economic way of life. And here in this part, whatever I discussed, we have discussed about the diversities related like social system of caste and intercaste relations, which are closely related to the economic activities. We also spoke about the lower social hierarchy, which also means low in assets and income. We also we discuss about the living conditions of the communities are subject to change both for external and internal factors, especially for the policy interventions by the government. And here again, the role of the social work intervention is very, very important. And the policies which have been framed for the development of the villages has to be properly framed so that, development is ensured. Okay. So with this, I can finish up the unit. I finished with the unit. I mean, just whatever I want to speak about, I spoke here today. Anything you want to say, students, can you please ask me? I will stop here because it's 11:30 now. You may be having another class. Anything you want to ask me, please ask me. Students.
What is Jejamani system, madam?
Jajmani system was existing in our society earlier, where services are exchanged, service to service. People, those who give the services are giving the services are called as jajman, or taking services are called as kamin. Okay. For example, suppose I am a washerman community and you are a goldsmith community, or you are an agriculturist. So I will wash your clothes. In turn, you will give me food grains. Okay. Service to service, Jajmani system. It was existing earlier, but now it is not there. We speak of it, and everything is exchanged in terms of money. The money plays a very important role now. Anybody? Did you get it, child? Jajmani. Hello? Hello? Did you get it? Excuse me. Sloka, I don't know anything.
Agriculture, ma'am.
Yes,
Dry
child?
land.
Dry land agriculture. Tell me. Hello? It's a mainstream agriculture. Dry land agriculture is, mainstream agriculture. Where 4-10 million people depend on the dry lands for living. And this dry land are mainly depend upon the rain for their agriculture. Whatever we find, the dry land agriculture is more. Like, when you talk about the production of cotton, production of sorghum, production of pulses, production of oil seeds, are produced in these dry lands only. Is 75% of cultivable lands are found in dry land. In India, especially, we talk about dry lands in this country constitute more than 70% of the cultivable lands. And despite several odds stacked against them, they produce about 42% of the country's food. Hello? Anything else?
Okay, yeah,
ma'am.
Yeah. Shloka, I don't know about the exams, child. You can talk to any of the person in the administration. I'm not aware of the exams. Yeah. Yeah, somebody was saying something. Yeah, anybody wants to say anything? Shall I close? Yes, ma'am. मोहम्मद माजिद, कुछ पूछना है आपको?
मैडम एक मेरा एक रिक्वेस्ट है आपसे.
बोलिए.
But it's not regarding that subject related, but it's our asking that Bravo hosted this opportunity, but online classes. But मैम हम यहाँ पे काफी 3 साल की कोर्स ड्यूरिंग दिस पीरियड में है, लेकिन हमने कभी भी टाइमली आई थिंक मतलब 1 वीक बिफोर, इससे अलावा हमको कभी भी 3 मंथ्स या एडमिशन होते हुए बुक्स मटेरियल्स किसी भी तरह के हमको मिला नहीं. तो हाउ डू वी रीड मैम, हाउ डू वी रीड एंड हाउ डू वी अचीव द सेमेस्टर्स क्लियर मैम? तो बताइए, ये इस तरह से हैदराबाद होस्ट करता है, तो कैसे हम सेमेस्टर्स को पार करेंगे? इसी की वजह से हमको 3-3 4-4 सब्जेक्ट फेल हो रहे हैं. कैसे हमको ये, कैसे अभी लॉक्स वगैरह बहुत है हमको, तो मटेरियल्स हमको अगर अर्ली इशू करता है तो एडमिशन के साथ साथ ही तो हमको पढ़ने में बहुत आसान हो जाएगा. जैसे आपका अभी ये क्लास सुन रहे हैं, हमारे पास कोई मटेरियल्स नहीं है.
नहीं
तो
है.
आप
अच्छा, एक्चुअली मैं क्या सोच रही थी, आज का भी क्लास के लिए मैं आपको पीपीटी देना सोच रही थी आपको, मगर उन लोगों ने मुझे रैंडमली बताया था क्लास के लिए. बट मैं एडमिनिस्ट्रेशन से बात करूंगी कि आप लोगों का मटेरियल मिल जाए.
मैम एडमिनिस्ट्रेटिव से हम तो बहुत रिक्वेस्ट कर चुके हैं और मेल कर चुके हैं, फोन कर चुके हैं, बट दे आर नॉट रेस्पॉन्सिव. तो हम जाके स्टडी सेंटर में जाके उनसे बहुत बार रिक्वेस्ट कर चुके हैं हाथ जोड़ के. तो सर हमको कुछ करिए, हम तो वैसे रेगुलरली जा नहीं पाया कॉलेज को, इसी की वजह से ऑनलाइन कर रहे हैं, ओपन यूनिवर्सिटी ज्वाइन किए हैं, लेकिन इसका भी अगर बुक मटेरियल वगैरह नहीं मिलेगा तो कैसे पास करेंगे? तो हम तो बहुत ही गए गुजर चुके हैं मैडम. हमारा तो आंध्र प्रदेश में, हम चित्तूर से बात कर रहे हैं, तो बहुत ज्यादा फेस कर रहे हैं, बुक्स किसी का मिला नहीं है. आज भी उनको मैसेज किया, बट उसका भी रिगार्डिंग कोई रिप्लाई नहीं है. अगले ये ऑनलाइन क्लासेस खत्म होते ही हमको जस्ट 3 दिनों में एग्जाम का डिक्लेयर कर देंगे, तो कैसे लिखेंगे मैडम?
वो सही बात है. मैं तो देखो अपनी तरफ से, तो मैं अपनी तरफ से कोशिश करती हूँ लोगों को. मैडम
एक तो अपना साउथ की नाम इतनी ऊंची है, हर जगह में पढ़ाई के माध्यम से अच्छा होते हैं साउथ इंडियंस करके, लेकिन इस तरह से बदनामी भी आ रहे हैं ना मैडम. हमको मटेरियल्स नहीं मिला तो कॉपीराइट करना पड़ेगा फिर. कॉपीराइट करने के लिए भी तो हमारे पास मटेरियल्स भी प्रिंटेड नहीं हो रहे मैडम. इस तरह से कर रहे हैं. ब्रावो, हम मेरे इसको रिक्वेस्ट कर रहा हूँ हैदराबाद को, प्लीज हमको थोड़ा जल्दी हमको बुक इशू करें, ताकि हम उसमें पढ़ के हमने अच्छे लिख सकें.
Absolutely, Sudhir. We'll try. I'll just put a word to them. Okay. जो आपको भी कोई जो भी दिक्कत है, certainly I will get back to you.
ये क्लासेस थोड़ा सा दिक्कत नहीं मैडम, ये तो हम 3 साल से फेस करें. 3rd सेमेस्टर, अभी 3rd ईयर, मैंने 15 अगस्त को पे किया 3rd सेमेस्टर का 3rd ईयर का एग्जाम, जो एडमिशंस. तब से मेरे को अभी तक किसी का भी बुक्स नहीं आया हुआ तो सिर्फ फर्स्ट ईयर का आया हुआ है. जो फर्स्ट ईयर ज्वाइन किए हुए हैं उनका आया हुआ है. तो 5th सेमेस्टर का, 6th सेमेस्टर का कोई बुक्स नहीं है हमारा पास. तो 4th सेमेस्टर का, 3rd सेमेस्टर का दिया था, वो भी 1 वीक बिफोर.
अच्छा,
सिर्फ
मैं लोगों को बोलने की कोशिश करूंगी. थैंक यू मैम. अकॉर्डिंग टू द एकेडमिक कैलेंडर वी शुड हैव रिसीव्ड बुक्स बाय नाउ. एवरी टाइम आई कॉल मटेरियल दे से दे आर स्टिल प्रिंटिंग. बट एनी हाउ, व्हाटएवर क्वेरीज एंड कंस्ट्रेंट्स आर देयर, और आपका जो दिक्कतें हैं, I try to put a word as a teacher. I will tell them, because I am in different place, but I will put a word to the concerned people and try to see that they will certainly help you before the examination. जो भी चाहिए आप लोगों को. Okay. Thank you Sudhir and thank you other guys.
एक और रिक्वेस्ट, इससे पहले मैडम कुछ था कि हमको ऑनलाइन में जो स्टडी मटेरियल वगैरह डाउनलोड करके हमको कुछ तो कुछ पढ़ते थे, अभी
अच्छा।
उसकी भी अगर स्टडी मटेरियल डाउनलोड कर रहे हैं तो वो भी बता रहे हैं आपको ऑलरेडी पे किया होगा तो आपको ब्रावो इशू करेगा, आपका होम एड्रेस पे आ जाएगा। तो अभी तक आया नहीं है तो वो भी डाउनलोड नहीं हो रहा, तो कैसे लिखेंगे मैडम? एग्जाम दे देंगे तो हम लिख रहे हैं तो पूरा फेल करके भेज रहा है,
अच्छा।
क्या लिखेंगे फिर? तो हम तो ये फर्स्ट क्लास में जो पढ़े थे स्कूल में, हाई स्कूल में, वही लिखना पड़ेगा।
नहीं
क्या
नहीं, अभी
लिखेंगे?
अभी आज का जो आपका पेपर है रूरल एंड अर्बन का है, जो सुनिए आपको मैं आप अभी तो मेरा नंबर मैंने आप लोग को दिया है, आप मुझे कांटेक्ट करिए इस पेपर के लिए, जो भी आपको मटेरियल चाहिए। मैं अगर आपको टाइम पे नहीं मिलता है तो बट आई ट्राई टू सी दैट इसका मटेरियल मैं आपको देने की कोशिश करूंगी।
थैंक यू
दैट्स
मैडम,
व्हाट आई
थैंक यू
कैन
मैडम।
एश्योर यू फॉर दिस पर्टिकुलर पेपर।
तो
चलेगा?
मैम मैं इस दौरान मैं कहने का ये मतलब था कि यहाँ के ब्रावो हैदराबाद भी होस्टेड है, यहाँ पे लेक्चर उन भी सुन रहे, वो भी सुन रहे हैं मेरे बात। तो मैं आई होप दैट, इसलिए मैंने आपको निवेदन किया कि कुछ उन लोग भी कुछ सुन के हमारा कुछ मटेरियल जल्दी वगैरह भेज दें।
Certainly, they must be listening. Even I personally will put a
यस
word to
यस,
them as well. Okay.
थैंक यू
Thank you
मैडम,
so
थैंक यू,
much.
थैंक यू।
Thank you so much. Please take care. All the best to all the guys. ठीक है, बाद में मिलते हैं वापस एक बार, ठीक है?
श्योर मैम, श्योर मैम।
Thank you.